Okay, so when you picture an otter, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's something just ridiculously cute. But behind all those viral videos and adorable behaviors, there's a really interesting question. Are these animals actually as clever as they seem?
I mean, we've all seen the pictures, right? Sea otters floating on their backs, holding hands so they don't drift away from each other. And we've all heard how they use little rocks to crack open shellfish. It all looks so playful, so social, and, well, so smart. But what's really driving all that?
To get to the bottom of it, you have to look at their biology. See, unlike a seal or a whale, sea otters don't have a thick layer of blubber to keep them warm in those icy Pacific waters. Their entire survival hinges on their fur, which, by the way, is the densest of any animal on the planet. If that fur gets dirty or matted, they can get hypothermia, and fast. So to keep this life-saving coat in perfect condition, a sea otter might spend up to 5 hours every single day just grooming itself. And no, this isn't about looking good. It's a full-time job that is absolutely essential for staying alive. It's a nonstop, intense survival strategy. And it's not just random cleaning. It's this super meticulous 3-step routine. First, they have to scrub out any grease or oil from their food because that would let the cold water seep right in. Then, thanks to their loose skin and flexible backs, they can twist around and get to every single spot. And for the final step, they literally blow air into their fur, which creates this insulating layer. It's like having a built-in wetsuit and a down jacket all in one. So yeah, the sea otter is clearly a master of its own environment. But here's the thing. They're just one of 13 different otter species out there, and they all live in totally different habitats. So, does this kind of smart problem-solving ability run in the family?
All right, so let's meet a few other key members of the otter family.
Back in 2015, a researcher named Robert Gormley decided to dig into this exact question. He came up with an experiment to test the problem-solving skills of 3 very different types of otters that were living in zoos. And he picked the perfect subjects. You've got the super social North American river otter, which hunts in groups. Then you have the much smaller Asian small-clawed otter, which is famous for its incredible hand dexterity. And finally, the giant river otter from South America, the biggest and most social of them all. I mean, what a perfect group to test. Okay, so how do you even test an otter's intelligence? It's not like you can give them a multiple-choice test. You have to design a puzzle that makes sense in their world. The researchers decided to go with a classic test called the Aesop's Fable paradigm. You might remember the old story about the thirsty crow who dropped stones into a pitcher to make the water level rise. Well, this is the scientific version of that, and it's a fantastic way to test if an animal understands cause and effect. The setup was pretty simple. They attached a clear plastic tube to the otter's enclosure, and inside that tube, floating on the water, was a yummy piece of fish. But it was just too low for them to grab. A very simple problem with a very clear reward. Now, the otters were given a little toolkit with 3 ways to solve the problem. They could drop stones into the tube to raise the water level, they could use a stick to try and poke or spear the fish, or they could even spit water from a nearby bowl into the tube. 3 totally different ways to win. The big question was, what would they do? So, the researchers set up the cameras, they brought the otters in one by one, and they waited for that little spark of genius. But what they saw was not what anybody expected. That's right, not a single otter from any of the 3 species. Not one of them figured out how to solve the puzzle. They'd paw at it, they'd look at it, but none of them made that leap to actually use the tools. But hold on, the story doesn't stop there. Because even though none of them passed the test, how they approached it was really different. The huge, social, giant river otters, they were by far the boldest. They went up to the tube way more often. Meanwhile, the smaller Asian otters were much more timid. And over the course of many sessions, a pretty clear pattern emerged. For most of the otters, the number of times they even bothered to go near the tube just went down and down. Basically, they got bored and just lost interest. But when the researchers were crunching the numbers, they found something truly amazing. The single biggest thing that predicted how an otter would behave wasn't its species or how social it was its age. And the trend was unmistakable. Younger otters were all over this weird new tube, investigating it right away. But the older an otter was, the more hesitant it became. It took them way longer to make first contact. It's a classic case of what scientists call neophobia, a fear of new things, and it often gets stronger with age. So, what does this failure really tell us? Well, as it turns out, it teaches us a whole lot about how we even think about animal intelligence to begin with. It's really tempting to look at these results and just say, well, I guess otters, except for sea otters, just aren't that bright. But man, that would be missing the entire point of the story. The scientists themselves were the first to point out the study's own weaknesses. First off, the sample size was tiny. We're talking only 6 otters total. Second, the otters weren't hungry, so they didn't have much motivation to work for a fish they didn't really need. And maybe most important of all, for an incredibly social animal like a giant river otter, being tested all alone might have been just too stressful for them to even focus on a puzzle. The study's author, Robert Gormley, actually put it perfectly. He said that the very thing that made otters so interesting to study, their intense social bonds, might have ironically been the very thing that kept them from finishing the test. The whole setup was probably fighting against their basic nature. And this gets to the real heart of the matter. We have to rethink what intelligence even is. It's not some single ladder that we can rank animals on from dumb to smart. It's way more like a toolbox. Each species evolves its own unique set of tools that are perfectly designed for the challenges of its own world. A sea otter's rock-smashing tool is genius for its life, but it might just be the wrong tool for a plastic tube puzzle. And maybe that leaves us with one final thought. We create all these clever puzzles to test animals, but what if we're kind of missing the point? What if the true measure of intelligence isn't about solving our strange little problems, but about how brilliantly they have already solved the ultimate puzzle, thriving and surviving in their own world,